It's okay. I think I'll get started. I do have an introduction, so I'm sure people will be kind of trickling in now. So, hello everybody. Um, Good afternoon. Thank you all for kind of sacrificing your lunch hour. I know this isn't exactly a lunch and learn, but it's kind of a session during the lunch hour. Um, but joining the first kind of lunch and learn, hosted by the Budget Services Department here at DH, the first lunch and learn of the year. My name is Nick Norimoto. I am the University Budget Director here at Dominguez Hills. I have been in this role for close to 7 months. Um, it's kind of odd how it feels like a long and short time at the same time. But it's been a great 7 months. I thank you all for those who I've met that made this experience, welcoming and things like that. Um, but one of the things that was discussed prior to me even starting here and during the first few months of being here on campus was how much the campus really enjoyed and appreciated the lunch and learns that were hosted by ANF, hosted by the budget office. So it was a work in progress, but thank you for your patience over the last year and waiting for us to kind of relaunch this series. Our plan is to host one of these every quarter. So 4 times a year. Just to go to the next slide. These are the dates that we have for the next lunch and learns. They're all going to be during the same hour, same day, Wednesdays from 12 to 1. We have our next one scheduled on May 24th, then August 16th and November 8th. So feel free to, take note of these dates. But we'll also be sending out save the date emails. Thank you to Jason Boxer for helping coordinate with that. There will be emails that he will send out, and kind of just an FYI, in addition to the reminders and save the date, there is a link to RSVP so that you can add this kind of lunch and learn session to your calendar. And there's also an opportunity in the link to let us know if there's anything that you'd like to see, you'd like to hear covered in future lunch and learns. We are welcome to ideas. We'll try to gauge on kind of interaction and things like that to see what would be the most helpful. But for the first lunch and learn, we actually reached out to our campus budget and fiscal officers and our academic resource managers, or the ARMs and AVPs, our leadership, just to see what they wanted to see. But after thinking about for the first session and feeling like this is kind of the return and relaunch of lunch and learns hosted by budget, I just thought it'd be helpful to do like an introduction to budget. I know it's been a long time since the last lunch and learn, and some of these topics may have been covered in the last iteration. My predecessor, Katie, who launched these series, probably has gone over some of these concepts, but I, kind of, since it's been a year, there could be new folks to the campus, new people like myself, new to the CSU in general, or new to just handling budget, or people who are expecting in their role to be interacting with those that are handle their fiscal matters. So I just thought an introduction to budget would be a good idea. Also, me being new to the campus, I can provide just kind of my perspective and how I view budget at the CSU. So I know that, so this really be more for like the new folks that are new to CSU or new to the campus or new to budget. But if, I hope this will be helpful. If there's probably folks here that have been longer at the CSU than me, definitely longer at the campus than me. This may just be a nice reminder or a resource to explain your new budget folks or new finance folks in your own areas. So I hope this will be helpful. There will be time after to launch, for any questions, but feel free. I think I can see the chat, and if there's any raised hands, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation and we can address them either during or after. Okay, so long introduction. I think we have more folks in the room too, so we can start with the agenda. So for this lunch and learn, I'll be going over an introduction to budget, as I kind of stated, specifically budgeting here at the CSU, at a CSU campus. So I prepared it to be kind of a good mix between high level and some detail. I didn't want it to be too overbearing, but just in what this presentation will cover will be chart field values and chart field string, some other budget terminology and concepts, the beginning of budget planning, and what a budget summary will look like kind of in your area. And of course, we'll have time for Q&A. And also after the presentation is over, we'll be posting this PowerPoint on the budget website at the URL at the bottom. So the reason I wanted to start with chart fields, I know this may be kind of a weird way to start, is because this is the first thing I remember learning when I first started the CSU. When I came here, my budget director at the time was like, this is a chart field string and this is what it is. And I remember that's the first thing I learned. It was also something that took me a while to understand because it is kind of convoluted, but it is something important to learn here at the CSU because chart fields, like everything at the CSU, kind of evolve and change and will forever to do so. Also, it's important to familiarize yourself because it is the common language that amongst all of the finance. It's something that you use in budget, in accounting, with accounting accounts payable. You use it with HR because there's position, budgetary matters, and procurement. So it's something that I feel like is important to learn. Instead of defining what a chart field values is, I just like, sometimes you can hear it as saying like a chart of accounts or chart field elements, but it's basically a finance category. The CSU established these different categories to organize and distinguish every single financial transaction. And if you put these chart field values or put these categories together, they create a chart field string, which is something that you'll use in every financial transaction. So this is a chart field string. This chart field string consists of the following chart field values or the categories that I kind of just said, and it goes in this specific order. So the chart field string starts with 3 mandatory chart field values, which are account, fund, and department. It could stop there because those are the 3 mandatory ones that you absolutely need. But depending on the kind of financial transaction that your department is planning on using or your infrastructure, it could continue with these optional chart field values or these optional categories, which include program, class, and project. Now, I was thinking about it, and I know I could go over like how many digits and the structure and all the rules of these chart field values, but I'm not going to. I feel like that will just kind of slow down this process and make this presentation less enjoyable. But I am going to just generally go over what they are and how we use them. But I do want to make a point that there are certain rules and there are specific structures to these values. And I just want to shout out to like our accounting team who has created something on their website to provide you with a good resources of what those rules and structures are. So if you look at this URL, you can learn further. I feel like it might be easier to digest if you read it as opposed to kind of me presenting to you all those those rules. But I will be going over kind of just generally what a chart field string is. Okay, so the first one is account. That basically is of what your financial transaction is. What is the financial transaction for? What type of transaction is this? So some examples would be, is it a revenue? Is it an expenditure of salary, software purchase, or supply? Those kind of categories of what the expense or budget or anything is. That's account. The next one is fund. Fund is the source of funds, and it basically is telling you like from what pot of money is this transaction being funded from. So some examples that you might be familiar with or learning to be familiar with is we have our main operating fund here at Dominguez Hills. It's AADHT. So that's like the main source of fund. There's also other types of source of funds or different pots of money like the Student Success Fee Fund, or we have maybe some colleges or departments have course fees or other fees that they collect designated for their department. There's also the housing or parking fund, in the CSU or on this campus. The third of the mandatory chart field string is department, and that's just the who. Which campus department responsible for this transaction? So you all belong to a specific department. Each department has a specific department ID. And so some examples are something like my department, budget office. Some in the colleges, there's a history department. A lot of, when you talk to budget people, they may say like the VP's office of, maybe they're responsible for certain expenses or certain budgets. And then lastly are just the optional, I just want to briefly go over is just the program, class, and project, the optional chart field values that can go onto the string. But this really is just additional tracking or delineation for reporting or organization. So it's really created or defined internally by your department or division or the university. So just depending on how tracking you want to track, and that's something that budget and accounting can help you with as far as tracking goes. But certain departments have programs use these things and some don't. For project, the last one, project code, is mostly used for capital projects. Okay, so now that I went over the chart field string, I kind of just wanted to, and as silly as this may sound, like the chart field string kind of tells a story. And I kind of wanted to give some examples of like concepts that maybe your department has to deal with and how that relates to a financial transaction. So again, here's a chart field string, and then here's a couple examples. So the first one is the CSU DH Basic Needs Department issued emergency grants to students. And these grants were funded from an allocation by the state, specifically for CSU basic needs initiatives. Like the state gave all the CSU dollars for basic needs. So what the chart in relation to a chart field string is the following. Again, a bunch of numbers and letters, rules and structures that you can learn, but 609008 is the what, the account that's specifically assigned to an emergency grant. AADHT tells us that it's state funding, it's an operating fund, so that's where the funds come from. 40013 is the basic needs department ID. And then SA 183 is the additional organization that Basic Needs created to help them track how they're using their dollars for emergency grants. So that's, again, the story that's being told through a chart field string. A second example, something maybe a little simpler, is that housing will hire additional student workers for residence life. 601, and this is the chart field string. 601303 is the account, the what of it's also, student worker salaries. The fund or the pot of money is HT101, which is the housing fund. The fund that's the main source, are the housing rents and student housing that they pay for housing. And then 46010, there are maybe a couple departments within the housing fund. One of them is being residence life, and they're going to be hiring student workers within the housing fund. So I hope that kind of translate to a chart field string and kind of the storytelling that and how we use that in every transaction. So yeah, so again, now that I've explained what chart field string and chart field values are, I just want to reiterate that it is used for every single transaction. It's used in budget when you do budget transfers, budget allocations, position funding. We have HR, we touch with HR positions. When it comes to accounting, you use a chart field string for accounts payable, paying invoices, expenditure transfers, and procurement. When you open a requisition or a purchase order, you have to attach a chart field string because that's where you plan on spending them. So now that I've kind of reviewed some of the building blocks and the technical jargon of chart field string, I kind of want to now go over budget terminology and concepts and how a good transition from chart field string to other terminology. So the first of the terminology is budget. I consider it as your plan. And some other ways of terms that we use it here on campus or at the CSU is it the funding, your funds, your available monies, your allocation. So that's the budget portion. Then there's actuals, which is your activity, what's actually happening throughout the fiscal year. Comparing, and that kind of compares to your budget. So that's your actual expenditures, your actual revenue collected, the payroll, the people that you're paying that's hitting your budget. Paid invoices with accounts payable, basically it's a lot of all accounting related activity. There's encumbrances, which are related in relation to purchase orders. And that's how I relate encumbrances are. It's POs, it's the requisitions that you open, whether they're open or closed. It's funds that are earmarked or encumbered or spoken for. It really is things that are planned or future spending. So you may open up a blanket purchase order with a specific vendor, attaching a chart field string to it, and you plan on spending a certain amount of money throughout the year. And it is once you open that PO and encumber those funds, it is affecting your budget. And then yeah, reservation of budgeted funds. And then lastly, how that all kind of relates together is the balance available. So sometimes you may hear BBA, budget balance available. Sometimes that term could be used. Balance available in relation to it being positive or negative or surplus or deficit. So how to kind of bring it all together with those terms is that you start with your budget, you subtract your actual activity, you subtract any open purchase orders that are in your department, and you get your balance available. So that's kind of just in relation to those terms. So the next couple slides I'm going to review are probably the most important terms, I would say. Important terms or concepts when it comes to budget. If you ever are in a meeting with or having a conversation about budget matters or fiscal matters, these terms are constantly and consistently will be used. And it's going to be used consistently and constantly because it's essential when it comes to budget planning. And the terms are base and one time. I kind of wanted to just kind of make that prevalent as far as for introduction to budget. So instead of defining it, I'm going to use give you guys some synonymous terms of how we also refer base and one time too. So for base, we may be saying ongoing. And these are all related to the funding sources, right? So ongoing funds, recurring funds, permanent dollars, the original, and consistent. So when you hear like budget updates from our office or from the state or governor, they use these base terms when it comes to ongoing funds. And then the second is one time. So that could be synonymous with temporary or carry forward, carry forward being your ending balances from the previous fiscal year, adjusted or revised, some salary savings, and then reserves and fund balances. Those are all kind of one-time fund sources that that are consistently being spoken about when it comes to budget. And I think when I say the fund source side, we say base and one time, but there's also a direct correlation when it comes to the costs and the expenditures. There's fixed costs in relation to the base funds, and then there's variable costs when it comes to the one-time funds. So some examples, I left the synonymous terms at the top of it. I just wanted to kind of go over some examples of those base and fixed terms. So when it comes to funds, our base funds are our state allocation, the state appropriation of ongoing funds that the state gives the CSU. And then at the campus level, we have base funds of tuition revenue. When it comes to personnel, we have permanent personnel. So that is our tenure track faculty. We have management positions that are permanent, support staff. And also when it comes to salary increases, in-range progressions, or general salary increases that affect our, the CSU and campus, those are permanent and base expenditures that need to be funded with base dollars. Operating expenses are really, when it comes to base or fixed examples of operating expenses, are kind of consistent annual things. For example, like contracts and licensing that your department may have to plan for. When it comes to one-time and variable examples for funds, so for base, we spoke about tuition revenue. That's, another one is like, another term that's being used a lot is target. So we have a specific target that we want to hit, and we, base budget for that. But sometimes in a good year, we have over enrollment tuition. So anything above that tuition base budget, it could be a one-time source of funds. And then of course, carry forward balances from the previous fiscal year. Some one-time variable examples for personnel are emergency hires, our non-tenure track or part-time faculty, which really are variable examples, are things that could be fluctuated based on variable scenarios, for example, like enrollment or volume of students or things like that, expenses related to that. And then stipends are other temporary personnel expenses. And then when it comes to temporary or one-time variable examples of operating expenses, there could be like startup or implementation costs for certain things. Maybe when it comes to a new software, you have to spend a little bit for one year in order to implement them, but those expenses won't continue on moving forward. Okay. So when it comes to the base and one-time terms and concepts, when it comes to budgeting, we use that when we are creating a budget plan. So if you're in the role of having to manage a department's budget or anything budget related, it's good to ask. I think it'd be great to ask these questions when it comes to creating a budget plan. Like what are our fixed costs? How much base funding do we have to cover those fixed costs? Like when it comes to those different types of costs, what positions are permanent, part of the baseline? What positions are needed to be part of the baseline? Like maybe there's growth in your department and you have to consider a permanent position that needs to be added on, but do you have the baseline dollars, or that's something that you have to, plan for if you ever get additional baseline dollars to plan that for an additional position? What operating expenses are fixed? Can they be supported with one-time funding? That could be if there aren't any baseline fundings, is there planned one-time funding that you can use to support some operating expenses? In addition, there's questions like what are our variable costs? How much one-time funding did you receive this year? And based on projections, how much one-time funding, maybe balances that you'll end up with the year that you can carry over for the next fiscal year? What are the costs that fluctuate or change based on enrollment, vacancies, things like that, that really can play a role in how much one-time or variable one-time funding that you can have to play with. If there's a huge amount of vacancies in your department, but you still have base funding for it, that's salary savings for your department. And that's something you can apply to maybe an emergency hire because of vacancies, or maybe there's a software, implementation cost that you're planning for. You can use the salary savings to pay for that. So it's just some of the questions and conversations that are consistently happening when it comes to budgeting on campus or within your department, or just campus level wide too. Okay, so next is, so after asking yourself those questions, or really deliberating on what the budget plan is for your department, or us, in our office too, the budget plan for the campus, we create a budget. And we get a huge amount of help from our divisions, from your division fiscal officers or your college academic resource managers. They are consistently working on their budget. And on our campus, it's something that we call a blue book. I think this is kind of an old school term in the CSU, and because it's not an actual book and it's not blue, it's just something that was used maybe in the past, but we call it a blue book as far as the budget plan that each of the divisions and departments have for our campus. So it's basically an Excel spreadsheet template to create a budget plan. It's broken down by chart field values. It's broken down by an account and funding source. It contains a list of positions, and they could include vacancies or filled incumbent positions. It contains the FTE count. So, a full-time staff member would be a 1 FTE. Sometimes there's part-time, things like that, and their salary amounts. And the blue book also contains operating expenses, if there are consistent base operating expenses for their plan. So the budget plan or the blue book will tie to your base and one-time allocation. So maybe something to mention is that, each year the divisions and departments are told what their base budget is and what their one-time budget will be. And based on that number, they have to plan a budget for their area and make sure it reconciles and ties to the base. Then the budget plan or the Blue Book gets uploaded to PeopleSoft, our financial system, by chart field string. So by chart field string, what we kind of, what we kind of went over in the beginning of the presentation, it's uploaded. The budget plan and Blue Book is broken down by chart field string and uploaded to the system. And I just, something to know, as we all know, is that the majority of the costs on our campus are personnel. So that it's really, it's important for position management to be aware of what positions are base budgeted and things like that. So here's an example of a Blue Book. I tried to provide something pared down as much as possible, and this is no way tying to any department on this campus. So it does seem like a lot, but I kind of wanted to show something that, just so you're aware, that something that your division fiscal officer or college fiscal officer or department person, maybe this is something that they are working with, or something that if you are one of those, you will be working with and are working with. This is again a pared down version as much as I could, but I did want to just highlight a few things. So for this specific budget plan, there is a professor named John Smith who is base budgeted with an annual salary of $8,000. And so the rows are the accounts, and then these two columns on the right are our funding sources. Our base, yellow in highlighted yellow, are our base budget, and then one-time fund of one-time funding as well. So so for this department, they're base budgeting this faculty member for $80,000. And then there might be some part-time faculty. So they have $10,000 in part-time faculty they can use. And that's a one-time source, also a variable cost based on kind of how their department is going to be teaching. Next, going into this department doesn't have any management in their line. So that's something that they don't have to budget for. It's not the case for every department, but just, I just wanted to show that there are certain expenses that may not be included in a specific department. And then for the staff coordinator, this department is budgeting $50,000 for base dollars, as this is a permanent staff position. So, and then of course, after the operating expenses, which, again, are the bulk of the expenses, there are some operating expenses that this department has to think about. Contractual services, they may have a contract with a specific vendor for, I'm not sure about service, but they know they have to spend $2,000 a year on that contract, and they know that it's an ongoing expense, it's a fixed cost, so they put it in there $2,000, and then they may have some one-time funds of $1,000 that they'll use for postage. So all in all, this is how they've spread their base and one-time funding with their personnel and operating expenses to total $132,000 and $11,000. So, went too far. Okay, so kind of to reiterate that the $132,000 is their Blue Book of base dollars and 11 of one time. When you upload it to the system, this is again very pared down and very simplified version of what you may see in PeopleSoft. We have our base of salaries, our staff member, and that contract to total 132. Our adjusted budget, or your one-time funding source of 11,000, 10,000 for faculty and 1,000 for postage, giving you a total budget of 143. Now, this is for this year. This is our plan. Let's say that the year is going to go over, and this is what we actually spent. We spent $50,000 in faculty expenses. We can see maybe that faculty member left mid-year, but then we had to hire some additional part-time faculty to kind of cover it. But the total expenses were $50,000. For staff, maybe there was an additional stipend or things like that for that staff member, or maybe some overtime or things like that, but the staff came in a little higher. For contracts, maybe there was a deal in the sense, so with this one, I put that they spend $1,000 for the year, but had a purchase order with a leftover of $1,000 that's still open. So maybe that's something that they didn't need to spend to the vendor, and it only cost them $1,000. So the thing is that they still have the encumbrance open. It's still affecting their budget of $2,000 of total expenses. And then postage, they had to spend more postage. So, they spent $2,000 in total. So in total, actual activity, what they actually spent, what they actually paid out was 108. They still have an open PO for that contract for $1,000 and 109 in total. So balance available. When it comes to the chart field lines, there are some deficits that you'll see, but as a whole, the department may be in the plus or surplus of $34,000. So that's, and these kinds of things can help with future planning. So the next line I did was so that was this year. For the next year, the base budget is unchanged because, that's an ongoing thing. So that stays the same of 132, but the adjusted amount, because we left in the blue with these balances, that gets carried over, and the adjusted amounts is directly in relation to that. So things are like, although there are deficits, these can be changed and through budget transfers. There's $40,000 of faculty one-time money that could be used to cover the overages from the other expenditures. And no activity for this year, so that's something that you can start with for this year. So there's 30. I went through that pretty quickly, 33 minutes. I hope that provided some high level, but also some detail as far as budgeting for introductions. That is all I had prepared for this first lunch and learn. I'm sorry that it ran a little short. I'm not sure, maybe there's some time you can have for your lunch, but I do want to open up for any questions or any comments, even suggestions. But if there are questions, or if there's something that you want to go back in the presentation and want to kind of go over and want to clarify certain things, please feel free. I'll leave it for a few seconds. Okay, I'm seeing or hearing none. Is that correct, Jason? Nothing, yeah. So, okay, so again, there is a question. Do departments on campus handle personnel, faculty, staff, budget allocations, or is it the dean's office that does that? Good question. I believe it might be variable depending on the division or the area. When it comes to personnel, something that the divisions are aware of is there are the permanent positions, those are base funded, like those aren't things that go away if those are filled. But for any changes when it comes to additional staff or things like that, when it comes to changes, that would probably have to be dealt with through your dean's office or through the division area. So I guess it would be a mixture. College fiscal officers are aware of their base budget for personnel for their different departments, I would imagine. So they do handle it, but it depending on what the action is and things like that. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Thank you all for kind of joining in on your lunch hour on this first lunch and learn. I hope this was helpful. And I hope this was just a good introduction to what budget is. This is something that a lot of discussions are happening, on every campus and things like that. So, there's a question from Thomas Norman.
Oh, just a compliment. Thank you for doing this. I thought you did a wonderful job. You explained things very clearly, and just want to encourage you to keep doing these things and giving us the space to ask questions. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And if there are any other questions, feel free to email me. I don't have my email address on this, but we can make sure to include that maybe on the next save the date. Feel free to email me and Norimoto@CSUDH. If you have any questions, Jason just put in the chat. Thank you very much. And hope we can continue to help you all. All right. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.